You know, Dan, I'm looking at that, and I understand that we're trying to catch up the multiple math with the reality now. And there are a lot of folks who look at it and say, you know, stocks are still rich, even at these, you know, banged up levels, and that we do have ways to go. I think really to what Mark was mentioning, people like Ray Dalio are saying, you get that Fed funds rate up to 4% or better. We're not that far now. We do have another 20% to fall. Are you in that camp?
Yeah, I think so, Neil. I think most investors are clearly signaling we are not at the bottom yet. So as ugly as it's been, it could actually get a lot uglier. You know, I want to point out a couple things I was looking at. Take Meta, for example. First drop in quarterly revenue in their history. So what's happening? Cutting costs, layoffs. How about Nike? Nike sales are up 4%. Yet their net income down 22%. But here's the other thing. Their inventory is actually up 44%. So what's happening is they're moving product at a discount. What does that signal to me? That signals inflation and recession, just as all the investors are seeing out there right now.
You know, I'm looking at it, guys. I wonder how you guide, particularly young investors who were dabbling back in the market, through COVID and experiencing, you know, maybe as rough as things are with us cooped up in our house, we're going to commit more to stocks, just maybe like their parents or older folks who also saw the market come back from all of that. Now all of that's off the table for the time being. So how do you advise them? Of course, age is everything and perspective is everything. And one man's version of a long term is another one's version of anything but. But for you, Mark, talking to young people, what do you tell them?
That is an awesome question. So, look, here's what I tell them. Come up with a rule book. Come up with a playbook, a set of rules. I don't care if it's 5, 6, 7 rules. Here's my discipline process for entering a stock, exiting a stock. You come up with a set of rules, and you buy stocks that fit those parameters. You don't buy anything that doesn't. You sell when it makes sense. Don't ever violate your own set of rules. If you do that, if you come up with a set of rules and you stick to them, there's going to be good days, there's going to be bad days, but over the long run, you're going to be just fine.
All right, so Dan, let me flip it around to you and older people who are either retiring, thinking about retiring, and are now thinking about pushing it back, if retiring at all. What do you tell them?
Well, I say, look, a lot of the great quitting that we saw is now becoming the great regret because people are now caught. So for people who maybe took an early retirement because of COVID, they now have an issue. So I'm telling them, don't sell. Hold on, because selling right now isn't going to help. You got to ride out the storm, and you got to look for ways to supplement your income, particularly if you were planning on living off of these investments. And that goes even beyond people who are at that age, Neil. You're seeing a lot of people in other categories that are looking at their retirement and saying, wait a minute, I'm not going to be able to retire on this. Again, you have to stay the course. I think what Mark said is accurate. Have a plan, and you have to stick to it, and it's based on a long-term outcome.
Guys, don't wander too far. I'm going to be needing your expertise for a subject we'll be talking about. And that subject, I'm going to go Mark Tepper and Dan Geltrude back on this. You know, Dan, I take nothing away from these vehicles, but, man, I'm looking at the power outages in Florida. You have an electric vehicle there. Of course, you're not going anywhere. And if you were stuck on these highways evacuating and you ran out of charge, you ran out of luck as well. Then I'm thinking in California, where they were trying to ration this stuff out and urge folks with those fancy cars, maybe don't charge them as aggressively or as much or at all. And I'm thinking to myself, this is not a great idea.
It may not be, Neil. I think there are a lot of hurdles to get over to make this realistic. And I agree with the report right there saying that, can we really make these deadlines? And the answer is, I don't think so. We simply don't have the infrastructure to be able to achieve these types of goals. A lot of people don't buy electric vehicles simply because of the anxiety of running out of a charge. And if there's no charging stations nearby, what do you do? Plus, how long is it going to take you to get back on the road? So I think a couple things have to happen. We have to have a lot more charging stations, have a grid that can handle it, and we need to be able to get more miles out of these batteries in these cars. Otherwise, we're not going to make it.
What I'm worried about, Mark, is that the nation's going to get fat in the process because, while you're charging, you're just going to eat. And I know there's a screen you can play with, but you're going to eat, and people are going to get fat and die early. And we don't want that. So, but my bigger thing, all seriously, is given these latest examples and these hits to power in this country, to say nothing of the grid, to say nothing what's going on in Florida, those are acts of God. But I've discovered something about acts of God. They happen a lot. And maybe that's God's way of saying, you know, cool it. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think it was Tesla. I think Tesla was talking about, you know, some like supercharger station they were going to build in Arizona, and that's awesome because it's sunny 363 days a year in Arizona. But, you know, for the other states, like, you know, in New York, how are you going to power that? Are you going to use solar and wind? Probably not. You're probably going to need fossil fuels, you know. So it seems like all of this stuff is really geared towards the elimination of fossil fuels because they're so evil. But at the end of the day, you need fossil fuels for pretty much everything. I mean, to produce the cars, to get the power to the grid, to the charging station, so on and so forth. So, you know, the charging, look, for me, I don't know how I'd be able to sit and wait for 45 minutes for my car to charge at one of these charging stations. I'd go absolutely crazy. Neil, like you said, I think I'd sit there and eat and probably be on social media too much, which is not, that's not healthy either.
No, I hear you on that. But, you know, Dan, it is coming at a time we're reassessing whether our grid's up to speed. They're learning in parts of Europe that theirs is not. Yet in parts of Europe, they're welcoming back traditional energy sources. You know, like natural gas, like oil, like even coal. It's an all-in approach because all are desperate. And I get that. And that's probably the way it should be. But then ultimately let the market decide the future of this and not governments. Your thoughts?
Well, Neil, what happens literally every year is there's an election of some sort going on. And as government changes between parties, as it always does, so does policy. So do you have, maybe not in California, maybe not in New York, but if you have some other states that actually try to get some of these policies through and they're successful, who's to say they're not going to get reversed somewhere down the line? So do we really get to the finish line that we're trying to have a cleaner planet? Absolutely. But if 2 states out of 50 and out of the rest of the world are doing this, what do we get?
I don't know. I come from the camp, Mark, you know, maybe, and this is not to be facetious, but it is kind of funny. Whatever California is doing, I don't want to do right away. I just have concerns. And I'm just wondering if we follow that sort of blueprint, we could be in some real trouble, couldn't we?
Yeah, well, I mean, this seems to be the Democrats' go-to playbook. Whenever there's a crisis, you know, they shift the focus back to climate change over and over and over again. But, you know, like Dan already mentioned, a hybrid approach is what we need for the foreseeable future. And Neil, like you mentioned, let the free market decide when we're all eventually driving EVs. It probably will happen.
Right.
Will it happen by this arbitrary date of 2035? No, no way it happens by 2035. Maybe 2075, you know, maybe longer. But, you know, Dan brought up a great point about 2 states carrying the load. America can't carry the load when you got Russia, China, India. They contribute 50% of the world's pollution. And they're not playing ball right now. So it seems like the government forcing this whole EV thing down our throats is probably going to impede our economic growth and allow our adversaries to grow faster than us, that's not good policy.
Yeah, I liked your approach here, the hybrid approach here. I know what you're talking about, but actually hybrid vehicles are fine by me. I mean, because you have the gas option, you have obviously the battery option, but you're not wedded to one at the expense of the other. And last time I checked, they get pretty good miles, even with me driving the car, which would slow it down dramatically under the best. But I'm telling you, there are options out there. Gentlemen, you're the best, and I appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. They even took a little bit of the selling pressure off the Dow, now down only 93 points.